Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my March reading wrap up. This month was all about getting over my reading slump and getting back into reading. So a lot of the books I read was very nostalgic, and some of them I've actually have read in the past and I loved them, and it kind of got me back into reading. So I really read two series. The first series I read this month was The Selection. I read the first 3 books in the series. This is really concludes their story, and then the other 2 books in the series is kind of their daughter and their story. This first book is called The Selection by Kiara Cass. Now this is very much a dystopian world. Prince of their nation needs a princess, and so they have this thing called selection where a bunch of ladies from all the different provinces can basically enter the selection and stand a chance to be the new princess. And it's also televised, and they have special tasks they have to complete, and they go on different dates and things. So very much kind of the Bachelor situation. Very easy to read, nice if you are getting into reading. I read this book a couple years ago. It's very young, and so obviously I think it was much better back then when I was younger, but I still gave this a 4-star because it is so nostalgic and I still loved it, and their story is very cute. It's just a lovely romance read. The next book I read in March was The Elite, which is the second book of the Selection series. Now this one I didn't like as much as the first one. It was very dragged out, and I do feel like all 3 books could have been written into one book. There was a love triangle in this book, so kind of her ex-boyfriend comes back onto the scene, and now it's not just her and the prince's story, but also the ex-boyfriend is kind of in between, and there's a lot more things happening behind the scenes, like there's rebels, and you find out a bit more about the history of the country, and the plotline kind of thickens. From that point of view, it was interesting, but like I said, I felt like it was just dragged out quite a lot, so I didn't enjoy it as much as the first one. This one I gave a 3.5 star. Now the third book I read in March was The One, which is book number 3 in the Selection series. This one was much better than the second one. This one is kind of the end of the prince and our main character's story, where she chooses to become the princess. Tension heightens in this book, and there's a lot more at stake in this book. So this was a much more fun-packed book. Like something was happening the whole time and you weren't quite sure what was going to happen. So from that point of view, this one was very interesting. I gave this one a 4.5 star. Actually, this was probably my favorite out of all 3 of them. So once again, if you're looking into getting into reading, the Selection series is a really great place to start. There's 2 more books in the series, which is about their daughter actually. The prince and then our main character, they have a daughter like 20 years later, and she has her own selection, and those 2 books are about her and like how she falls in love. I'm going to try and read those 2 next month, but for March I read the first 3. Another book I read this month is called Fire Endless by Rebecca Ross. It's the second book in the Elements of Cadence series. The first book is called A River Enchanted. It sort of plays on the elements on this island: water, fire, earth, and then wind. The island is broken up into 2 parts. I think it's called the east and the west side of the island, and they have very much like rivalry together. They do not cross, very much do not come together. I read the second book in the series called Fire Endless. There was sort of a sickness that had spread over the island, and everyone was trying to figure out how to combat this illness. Some people went like into the element world. Some of them are healers, and they try to figure out how to heal the island. And then our main character is a bard, and he basically sings to the elements, and then he can kind of manifest them in, I wouldn't say human form, but not human form, in like real form, like they become people almost, I can say, but they're still very much elements. It's a wonderful concept, very cool fantasy. There's a few couples you also follow in the story. I really did like the books, and I liked the storyline, and it was really nice. What I didn't like about it was how long it took me to finish. The middle of the book took me so long, like so long. And then near the end, it got so good, and I absolutely loved it, and I was sitting on the edge of my seat reading it, and I was saying to myself, like, this is going to be a 4-star. This is going to be amazing. It's so great. And then near the end, it just absolutely, like, it destroyed it. And the story does end in a nice way. So I thought like a 3-star was somewhere in the middle. The other thing that irked me as well was the fact that there were so many point of views in this book. Now I usually love different point of views. I love getting into every single character's mind and their point of view and how they think and how things unfold in their life. However, in this book, there are about 6 different point of views, and at a stage it just felt like whiplash. There were so many different storylines, and I literally felt like pulled and ripped by each character. Every storyline did connect to the storyline as a whole. It really did. But just because they were so different, I honestly felt like I was being whiplashed the whole way through. So I didn't like the multiple POVs. I think I would have liked it more if there were like half the POVs, if there were only 3. I didn't feel the need there to be so many of them. So those are really the only 2 things I didn't like as much about the book. But the book as a whole is still a really good read, a really nice fantasy. There's a little bit of romance. It's not spicy at all. It's very like fade into black kind of scenes. It's lovely and really good fantasy read. So overall 3 stars. Highly recommend. Just if you don't like multiple POVs, it's maybe not the nicest for you, because trust me, you are going to have whiplash. Okay, so another book I read in March, I don't have the physical copy for it, but it's called Lucky Hit by Hannah Cohen. It's book number 1 in the Swift Hat Trick trilogy. It's a hockey romance. Yeah, I give it a 2-star. It was not great. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. I stopped reading a lot of romance books exactly for this reason, because it just felt to me like there was absolutely no point to the book. There were a lot of cliches in it. It was just really cringy. I don't know if I'm too old for it, but it is a college romance, a hockey romance. He falls in love with her. She has like trauma from her ex-boyfriend. They fall in love very quickly. Like within the first couple of chapters, they are head over heels for each other. And there's like just not a lot of character development. And then later in the story, there's a whole thing introduced with her mother, and it tries to make this such a big deal, and it just didn't get it right. I feel so mean saying this about a book, because I know how much work goes into writing a book, and the fact that someone wrote a book and published it and so many people love it, that is amazing. Just the fact that she wrote a book and published it, I mean, that's amazing. If one person reads the book, that is beyond amazing. But just for my taste, I didn't like it very much. I will not read any of the other books in the trilogy, unfortunately. There's a big reason why I love reading dystopian novels versus like novels that are written in our time period. Because if you read it the year it comes out, I think it's okay, because there's current trends and current world situations going on that you can kind of understand. But if you are reading the book a couple years after it came out, those trends are no longer relevant, and it just makes it cringy, because it's like, okay. So yeah, overall, it wasn't a great book. I would not recommend it. Once again, just my personal opinion, not the biggest fan. The Very Queen by Victoria Aveyard, one of my all-time favorite books. Like, I've reread this now probably for the first time, and it's still 5 stars to me. Like, I absolutely love it. I love the world that it's set in. It's very much a dystopian world. Their world is split up into which color blood you have. You have people with red blood, who are the commoners, and then you have people with silver blood, who are very much the elites and the royals, and they have special abilities like fire or water, or they can manipulate certain things. Our main character, who has red blood, finds out that she has an ability. This book is really about her finding out that she has abilities, and the whole world is so confused because why does someone with red blood have abilities? And so it's just such a nice dystopian novel, and there's a little bit of romance in it as well, a little bit of a love triangle, but it's not about the romance, it's about so much more. And there's also like a rebel faction in it, so really such a good read. Red Queen is honestly one of my favorite reads ever. There's one sentence that gets repeated in this book, and it's that anyone can betray anyone. And when I tell you, before you read this book, just know that anyone can betray anyone, okay? At any moment. So I'm warning you, but really a good book, 5-star for me. The second book in this series is called The Glass Sword, and this one is also very good. The whole series is really good, but this one, it was not as good as the first one. Like, it was very drawn out. The rebellion is working more and more, and our main character is fighting to find new bloods like herself, which are people with red blood who also have abilities. You see a lot more of the world and how twisted it really is, but it was like a little dragged out. The whole book was just waiting around for what happens at the end of the book, but still really good read. I gave it a 4 star. The last book I read in March was King's Cage, which is the 3rd book in the Red Queen series. When I tell you I loved this book, I loved this book. If I could give it a 10 stars, I would. It was so great. It was so twisted. It was so manipulative. It wrenches your heart out. It's gut-wrenching. It's painful. It's traumatizing. It's beautiful. It's mesmerizing. One of my favorite books I've ever read was this book. I wish I could just read it again. Basically, the book is about what it says. The king keeps her basically on a leash. She can't use any of her abilities. She's wrenched away from her family and her friends. And he has this sick obsession with her, which, you know, in his twisted mind, he believes that that's love, but it's not. And he's just a twisted boy. But this book is so powerful, and the emotions that it wrenches out of you, I really don't know how to describe it other than I absolutely loved it. So much happened in this book. Most of it is very much where she's like locked in the palace. She can't go anywhere for months on end, and she's just there, and she has to do and say whatever the king wants. She doesn't have any choice in it. And so, such a great read. like I said, if I could give it 10 stars, I absolutely would, but I can't, so it's 5-star. Okay, so before we end this video, I quickly wanted to go over my favorite and my least favorite book of the month. My least favorite book of the month was obviously Lucky Hit. 2 stars. It wasn't that great. Just wasn't that great. And then my favorite book of the month was King Cage by Victoria Aveyard. It's the 3rd book in the Red Queen series, and it is absolutely amazing. It is really amazing. I'm so glad I pushed through book 2 to get to book 3, because book 2 there's nothing wrong with book 2, but it's just not great. But then in book 3, everything comes through. It's like, this is what you've been waiting for. It's the ultimate book. So I'm very excited to next month hopefully read the last book in the Red Queen series, and then also finish the last 2 books of the Selection series. So there we go. That is my March reading wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any book recommendations, please comment them below. I'm always looking for new books to try out and new genres. Maybe I'm just going to stay away from hockey romances right at the moment. I love hearing what kind of books you guys are reading. So once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.